Wow, that's awesome. I recognize some names. We are here today talking about grief. Geez, that beautiful, wonderful, painful, gut-wrenching topic, but how writing and the process of writing is a way to really, like the way I see it, it's making friends with grief. And how to, because we
Yeah.
can't make grief go away. He's going to be there. Have I ever told you this, Amanda? I have personified grief in my mind. He is this very, very tall, very bony, very old, like cold, clammy skinned with knotty, gnarly knuckles man who wears a cloak almost like death. Oh, your camera went off, Amanda. Oh, I lost Amanda. Hopefully she'll be able to come back. I hope she can come back. Her internet didn't look entirely strong, so hopefully she will come back. Anyway, I have personified grief in my world. That first came to me when I was writing my novel. I've only written one novel, and that novel is called The Shadows Shine, and it's about a coming of age, a 12, 13-year-old girl. And there you are.
Hello. I don't know where I went.
I don't know either, but we got you back. Yay. I was just talking about how I personified grief as this scary looking cloaked guy when I was writing my novel, The Shadows Shine. And the character goes through a death. Her best friend dies. She's a 12, 13-year-old girl and her best friend dies. And after her best friend dies, or actually in the process, a school teacher died, I think, she started to see grief as this cloaked figure. And she had to make friends with him because he wasn't going anywhere and he was showing up everywhere. So she made friends with him by going out in the woods and talking to him. But I realized in writing that book that it really helped me understand how to have a relationship with grief rather than be scared of it or have to just deal with it. Because I don't think grief is something we should deal with. I think it's something we should engage with and have a relationship with and really come into a space with.
Yeah, I've learned that it's something that I have to live with. And I've never thought about personifying it. But I think if I did, I would have several different persons because there's been so many different kinds of grief. So if any of you that are here also subscribe to my Substack, you'll know that I've had a lot of bereavements in the last decade. My sister-in-law died just over 3 weeks ago, and she was the 19th bereavement that I've had since 2016. So, yeah, grief is ever present with me. And there was at one point in a space of 2 years where 7 people died in 24 months. And it was like just reeling. You just start to like make friends with the grief from one, and then another would come. And yeah, they were all so different because my relationships with each person was different, and their deaths were so different. And yeah, my grief would be like a split personality person.
Multiple personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So writing has been a key part of how I've developed this relationship and become more comfortable with grief. And I wrote that book also. Oh my gosh, I'm just realizing now. Well, I started writing that book in 2004. And then I didn't pick it up again until the pandemic. And so I wrote it during the pandemic and published it in the probably 2020, the end of 2020 is when I published it. But I had gone through some intense stuff right before the pandemic. My uncle died in November. And then in December, another uncle died. And a third uncle had a heart attack, although he survived for another couple of years. And then the month after that, my best friend died. And on that same day, one of my favorite clients died. Oh. And so, yeah, I had a lot of
Wow.
bereavement all at once.
Yeah.
Um, and I think writing that book really helped me to, I don't know if it's necessarily, I was making friends with grief, but I also made inroads or relationship with those ancestors by writing about grief.
Mm.
And now I've come to really value and respect that grief isn't just about grieving death of people. Grief is about gr- for grieving the loss or change or shift of anything. And
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because there's so
yeah.
many different elements in our lives that we grieve for. So, in the same time that I was experiencing all these bereavements, I was becoming estranged from my family. And I was letting go of ideas I'd had about who I was supposed to be in relation to my writing and things that I thought that I should have achieved in life and versions of me that I thought I should have been. So, yeah, there's all these different layers of grief. And yeah, writing, obviously, because we're writers, sits at the heart of how we process everything. But I noticed I wrote um, like a tribute piece to my friend Tim on my Substack 4 years after he died on the fourth anniversary of his death. And in writing that, it made me realize things about our friendship that I hadn't really expressed fully, realized fully until I wrote them down. So
Mhm,
sadly, Tim left us through committing suicide
mhm.
as the first anniversary of his death, his wife's death approached, and she died suddenly too, um, of treatment for cancer, like an experimental treatment for cancer. And they said that it was what was going to be able to help her get over it. But they gave her the first treatment and she died the next day.
Oh,
Yeah. So we were still reeling from that. And then
yeah,
as her, the anniversary of that approached, who took his own life. And
yeah.
that was something that I had to process and deal with in a very different way than all of the other deaths that I had. And it was in writing that tribute 4 years after he died that I realized that I'd finally let go of all of the guilt that I'd felt about his death and the anger that I'd felt at him for doing that.
Mm,
And also fully realized everything that our friendship had given to me because I wrote it all down.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that writing brings something to us that just sitting in our heads and thinking about people and things never brings.
Mhm. It Writing a tribute to someone helps evoke them in who you are and the memories you have of them, so it brings them alive to you in
Mm,
a different way. And that's part of, like, the transformation of the relationship from how you relate to them in living versus how you relate to them after they're gone. Because they're gone physically, but they're not gone from your memories. They're not gone from your nervous system. They're not gone from your experience of them. And so much of who you are is because of how they impacted you.
yeah.
So
And
writing
it
it is
was,
a way of processing that.
yeah. And it was in writing that I saw all the different ways that he had impacted me and the things that he taught me about the nature of reality and about myself and things that I hadn't recognized until I wrote it down.
So what I haven't read it. What was some of that what came out in that tribute? What was something you learned about yourself as you wrote it?
That the friendship with him opened up my mind to concepts that I had never come across before. And we became friends when we'd moved away from London and moved to a tiny little village in North Devon. And him and his wife ran the local pub. And when we started going in the local pub for drinks and dinner, we became friends with them. And then we were like a really tight knit group of friends. And he had really like quite way out there approach to what this life is all about. And my mind was just starting to open up to that kind of thing then. This was back in 2012. And up until that point, I'd kind of hadn't really given that much thought to it. But if I did, I would have thought that I just believed what I was told in school about the Big Bang and all of that. Although there was always this question in my mind about, but where did the singularity come from? And he introduced me to all these different concepts and ideas about the nature of reality because he'd just done a PhD in metaphysics.
Wow.
Yeah.
So his mind was really explosive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sparked a thought. Maybe this is a slightly different curve, but last night I had dinner with a friend who she is that kind of friend who she's so curious and she asks such intriguing questions. And one of the conversations we had was how we choose or not, but how we as a threesome, as we were sitting at dinner, really choose to be around people who challenge our mindset, who make us think differently. We don't necessarily want to stay with friends who give us the echo chamber of believing all the same things. We want people to open our minds to make us think about things in different ways, to expose us to things we wouldn't normally experience and so forth. And so this girlfriend of ours was talking about she went to Bali in February and she was invited to an ecstatic dance event in Bali that was based on, it was very indigenous in its roots. And it was about the people connecting with their ancestors to the point where it was very much a grief ritual. And she showed us a video of it and it was really, really intense. It was an indigenous grief ritual of working with sound, so drumming and not just drumming on drums, but clattering pots and pans and making all kinds of noise as they were dancing. And then these women had these familial daggers. They were almost like family seals, but they were daggers. And they would put the point of the dagger on their chest and spin them as they were dancing. I mean, it was intense.
Wow.
And it was,
Yeah.
she said that the sound was such a cacophony. It was almost like, are my eardrums okay? But their intent with that was that they would go into a nervous system sort of almost hypnotic state, or I don't know if hypnotic's the right word, but hallucinatory, where they would absorb or activate or awaken the energy of their ancestors within them.
Wow.
And she
Yeah.
only showed us like a minute long, not even a minute long video of it, but the intensity of it was so profound. And it exposed me again to something I'd never experienced. Now I've done grief ritual as a shaman where I'm experienced with the Daguerre African drums as a way to activate and creating a grief shrine that evokes tears and causes those emotional expressions. But this was an entirely different exposure to how people embody their ancestors and grieve.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Are you gonna write about that?" And she's like, "I'm not a writer. You need to go and you need to write it."
Yeah, so I became really interested in different death rituals around the world after experiencing so much grief. And in researching them, I came across one from Madagascar, which is called Famadana. And in it, a year after their loved ones have passed, they exhume their bodies and dress them in like really lovely clothes and dance with them before then putting them back in their grave. And
Okay.
after I read that, it inspired me to write a flash fiction story, which isn't exactly that story, but it was the story of someone that had lost their wife to grief, wife in an accident, and they were grieving, and she came to visit as a ghost on their birthday, and they danced together, and it
Mm.
helped her to understand a different concept of what death means. And so I wove in all the different ideas that Tim had taught me about the nature of reality and this Famadana death ritual from Madagascar into this story. And it was the first time I'd ever written anything quite like that. And I sent it out to a literary journal once I'd finished editing it, which took a long time, like from writing the first draft to having a version that I was happy with was probably a couple of years. And then when I sent it out to the literary journal, I got an acceptance in half an hour. And that
Wow.
just never happens. Normally, you wait
Wow.
weeks to hear from them, whether it's a yes or a no. And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, right. So I just need to write from what's really here, what I'm really feeling,
Yeah.
and that's what resonates because I loved writing it and editing it, and it resonated with people that reached as well.
It's fascinating the different ways that different cultures grieve. Like we in the Western modern American culture would never consider exhuming a body a year later.
No.
But for them it's sacred. And it made me think of my African shaman training, and my shaman would talk about how funerals in his tribe, the Dagra tribe of Burkina Faso, when someone dies, they prop the body up on a tree for 3 to 5 days, and everyone in the village will come and they'll express their rage at the corpse. Like you said about being angry with your friend for dying by suicide, everyone in the village would just come and dump all of their contempt and all of their resentment, all of their anger at the corpse for whatever that person did in their lives. So it's like
Wow.
they could draw up all the aches and pains and whatever. And that would go on for like 3 or 4 days as the body's decomposing and there's flies and everything. So the symbolism of that was kind of helping to pull out all that stuff. But that's part of the point is that you leave it with the body. You leave all that icky stuff that you had fulfilled so that when you do actually bury the body, you are burying all that emotion with it so that when the body's buried and you perform the actual ritual, the funeral, then you can embrace the ancestor as truly transformed into a spirit entity that serves you. But here's the part that was like magical, and I'm sure it's true, but my Western brain can't comprehend. The way they would dig the grave would be rather than the size of a casket, it would be more like the length of the casket tall.
Hmm.
So they dig a small hole, and then they dig underneath that so that the body would have to go down and then be laid down rather than the whole hole. And
Mm.
in order to do that, and they didn't use a casket, they just buried the body. But in order to do that, they'd have to have people in the grave first. So couple people would get into the grave and then they would drop the body. And then those people in the grave would lay the body. And then they would bury all those people. They would fill up the hole
Wow.
completely. And then they would go back to the village where there would be people dancing and drumming and having the whole funeral ceremony. And the people that they buried that were alive would be there at the funeral. And of course, us Westerners were like, how'd they get there?
Yeah. What's going
And
on?
how did that work? And Malidoma said, we never ask. He's just like, I wasn't
It
one of
just
those to
is.
do it, so I didn't know, but we never asked because you don't want to know what they're doing.
Wow. Yeah. It's so different. Like here in the UK, I should imagine it's probably quite similar to how things are in the US, but it's like a really kind of buttoned up process. It's a lot to
Mhm.
do with bureaucracy. And then it's kind of like we have this ceremony which everyone goes to, and there's a casket at the front, and people say a few words, and then that's it. And it's all very any emotion is kind of repressed, any big emotion, and
Mhm.
then the casket is either taken away and buried or burnt, and then that's that.
It's just done. It's
Yeah,
very sterile.
it is really sterile. Yeah.
Yeah. The most recent funeral I went to was a year ago. My uncle, he was like 97 when he died. But it was very much like that. We went into a funeral home and he was in the front, and we all had to look at his dead body and talk to him. And then people sat in pews, very stern and quiet. And the pastor came and spoke, and it was a pastor who didn't even know him and spoke about him based on things that he'd done interviews. And it was just so formal and
Yeah.
not emotional. And I remember we weren't the family wasn't allowed to speak in the church. So that's why the pastor was doing the speaking. And it was like, but the family then did their speaking somewhere else. And it was very awkward and very odd. And then we got to the actual burial, and there was fake grass placed around the hole so you couldn't see the dirt. And they just pushed a button, and the
Mm.
casket just went down, and they didn't cover him up. We just walked away, and it just felt so formal. But I'm also thinking about different ways that people are grieving when it's more traumatic. Like in his case, we knew it was coming. He was 97. He'd had cancer for a long time. He'd had a heart attack. But like here in Minnesota, when Alex Preddy and Renee Good died, the people immediately started building a memorial shrine. And those shrines still exist, and we still tend to those shrines, and many people on a daily basis go and visit them. And thousands and thousands of people are dropping items there, whether it be fresh flowers or incense or candles or drawings, or like Alex Preddy's memorial has a whole bunch of stethoscopes.
Mm.
And the way that's a whole different way it's the opposite of that sterile environment.
Yeah.
Of course, their families probably did have the formal funeral, but this is a kind of ongoing grief that the community is holding and continuing to hold every day, because this is still part of our existence.
And perhaps also signifies a shift in the way we in the West are starting to process our grief and
I hope
the
so.
death of people that we love. Yeah. Like here in the UK, we had something not similar because it wasn't as tragic as what's been happening with ICE. It was tragic in a different way. But when Princess Diana died,
Mm-hmm.
and the outpouring of grief that was here, and the way people went to outside her palace and left like hordes and hordes of flowers and um, cuddly toys and all kinds of things. And nothing like that had ever happened here in the UK until that time. And I wasn't even here. I was away on holiday in Greece. Theme of my life, I'm always on holiday in Greece.
Such the
and
life you have, Amanda.
and I'd got up in the morning, and we were staying in this little apartment block where there was two apartments, me and a friend, and next door was a woman and her daughter, and we had like this shared terrace area. And I went out, and I was just sitting on the sun lounger, um, having a cup of tea, and the woman came out, and she was sobbing, and she was like, "Have you heard about Diana?" And I thought Diana was somebody that we'd met on the holiday or something. And I was like, "You have to remind me who Diana is." And she just looked at me like I was insane. And she said, "Princess Diana." And I was like, "What?" And she told me that she'd been killed in this car crash. And then she just like flung herself down on this sun lounger next to me and was just absolutely sobbing her heart out.
Mm,
And I just felt quite taken aback by the level of her grief for someone that she didn't know, that
right.
was just a public figure. And I felt like quite disconnected from this grief because Princess Diana wasn't somebody that really registered in my life. I'm not really a big royalist. And when I went indoors and I woke up my friend that I was on holiday with, and I said to her, "Princess Diana's dead." And she went, "So?"
Wow.
Yes. And
Everyone processes in their own way.
yeah. But then when I got back to the UK and It's like seeing all the news on TV and everything, and it was still going on, like, for weeks and weeks and weeks after she died, and
Yeah.
that was the first time we saw anything like that in the UK, but now it happens all the time.
Yeah. Do you know in the UK what happened to all the items? Like, did people collect any of them for a museum or anything? All the items that people left?
Yeah, like some of the, cuddly toys and, like, other things that people had made with her name on and stuff, they took some of them, yeah, but, like, obviously all the flowers and things just got thrown away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I have heard that there are people collecting items gradually from the different memorials and trying to save them for some sort of museum display at some point, but
Mm.
a lot of them are still out there. And of course, the flowers, the fresh flowers and so forth get replenished on a pretty regular basis. So, yeah, that
S
I wonder if Princess Diana was the first time anyone did that level of building a shrine sort of memorial
Yeah, it
space.
definitely was here. We'd never seen anything like it in the UK before that. But,
Yeah.
more recently, when George Michael died, he lived in a little bit countryside village just outside my hometown of Reading, and I was in my hometown of Reading for the Christmas holidays, and he died on Boxing Day. And we went out for a walk in the countryside, and drove through the village where he lived and where he died. And it was absolutely jam packed, full of people all going and leaving things outside his house. And so it's become
Mhm.
a real thing here now since then.
Yeah. When Prince died, Prince lived in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Um, and when he died, the entire downtown shut down that night, and people were out in the streets singing and dancing to his music right outside of First Avenue. And it was very impromptu kind of
Yeah,
thing.
what a
Like the
lovely
police had to,
celebration of his life.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe
But he,
like we process by writing because that's what we do, what comes from our heart. And other people that don't have that kind of outlet, they process their grief by going and doing things like this and placing things on shrines.
but however the form, it has to be, it is something creative. It's some sort of artistic expression that really helps us process, whether it's art or like a shrine itself is sort of a statuary. Uh,
Yeah. Or
It's its own
dancing.
form of art and dancing and the
Yeah.
whole dancing with the daggers. It was very intense.
Yeah. And dancing with the exhumed bodies.
Or yelling at the not yet buried corpse that's decomposing.
Yeah.
Some form of expression of emotion. And
Yeah.
really, the word express is to push out. So we have to come up with some sort of way to push out of us whatever we're feeling from all of this.
Yeah. And it seems like all of it is doing it in some way that's completely removed from how we behave in normal life in these
Mhm.
examples that we've discussed here.
Yeah. We need to step outside of our norm in order to press out these emotions and transform into something new.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's why our
Yeah.
normal funerals don't necessarily always work as a way to
No,
process grief.
no, they don't. Because they're really, there's no real expression of grief.
Yeah. Which makes it writing even more important for this is why writers write is because there are so many things we grieve that we don't recognize as grief, you know? Like when I think about what was my very first grief as a child, I was 2 years old and my mom put my blankie in the washer and it didn't come out. And I just sobbed and sobbed and well, it did come out, but it came out in threads and pieces. I actually still have it. It's hanging on a shelf over here. It's just this massive tumble of threads. But she talks about that story like you grieved so much and it was just a thing that it was a thing I was attached to. It was a thing that gave me identity, it gave me security, it gave me confidence, it gave me comfort. And to
Mm.
lose all that was a massive grief. And I think there are a lot of things in life that we grieve that we don't recognize as grief, like grieving a part of ourselves that change. Like when we lose a job or when we choose to take a different job or if we move from a house to a different place, grieving the loss of that home, grieving the loss of the community, or even just the change. We may not be losing the community, but it's changing, it's evolving into a different way.
Mm.
And if we don't have some sort of writing to process that, it can turn into something twisty inside us.
Yeah, but I've always had writing to to do it, so hopefully
Yeah.
I'm not too twisty.
Well, there's a big question, like, are writers more twisty and we just have a way to express it, or are we less twisty because we express it?
Maybe it's just human nature to be really twisty.
It is human nature to have all these moods and emotions.
Yeah,
But I know that all writers say, I write because I have to. I can't
yeah,
not. And
and
I was just saying that this morning as I'm starting to create YouTube videos about the stories that I'm writing about the women in the resistance. And that's what I was saying is I'm writing these stories because I have to. It, it's nothing extraordinary. It's just these stories need to be told. And in telling these stories, I'm processing the grief of all the things that have happened here. And I can't not tell the stories. I feel like the world needs to know what's happening.
yeah, they definitely do, and you're the person to tell it.
So I see Christy said this is such a great topic. I love learning about different celebratory grief rituals from around the world. And then Mel just said, I think artists in general, including writers, are the ones that help say what we all need to say somehow. I believe everyone has these experiences of a kind. And then Heidi said, any tips for processing acute grief? My dad passed on Memorial Day. Oh, Heidi. Oh, I've been writing down memories as coping mechanism and poetry too, but it is so hard. I'll let you handle that one, Amanda, because you're really good at that.
Well, we're all different, and the way that we process grief is very unique to us. But for me, when been experiencing these really deep griefs that I've had over the past decade, the writing that I've done was purely just sitting down and just sinking into my heart and not trying to express anything in particular, but just feel what wanted to come through me. And having a mindfulness practice during the time that I've experienced all this grief has really helped me to be able to just be with what is and not try and change it or think it should be something different. And so just sitting with your hand on your heart and closing your eyes and sinking into your heart and just breathing and feeling everything is one of the best things that I found. And then writing down what it is that's coming up and just seeing where that starting what coming up leads you.
You just made me go there. Thank you, Amanda.
That's okay.
Heidi, one of the things I think I'll tell you a story as to how I've processed some intense grief is in 2020, or actually 2019. It's many of my followers know this. Heidi, you probably know this. In 2019, on my birthday, I got a call that my best friend had fell and broken her neck. And she and I had been friends for decades, and I had had lunch with her at least 2 or 3 times a month for decades. Um, she broke her neck in a way that she could still feel her body, but she didn't have control. And she survived for another 6 months. And so for those 6 months, I fed her breakfast almost every day. So we were very, very close. And when she did die, it was the day before she died. She looked at me and she just said, I'm done. And I knew that she would go very, very soon. And the doctors were still, oh, we can fix this, we can adjust this. And I just knew she would not make it through that night or the next night. Um, but it was intense. Like those 6 months of caring for her were very intense. And I find that I've been processing her grief, the grief of her loss ever since. It's been 6 years now, but every year something comes up. And this year, what well, let me say, when she died, she had a iris garden that she never got to see because she had just planted it before she fell, and then she died before it bloomed the next year. So I got a bunch of those irises, and so I've been caring for and nurturing those irises for these 6 years, 5 years. And last year, they didn't bloom because I had retransplanted them and tried to reconfigure them, and I was that was its own process of grief. Seeing all the work I've done to transplant them and they weren't blooming, and, "Oh, did I screw them up? Are they not gonna survive? Is this another losing of Julie?" But then this year, they came back in abundance, and I've just found myself snapping pictures and going out every morning with my coffee and sitting with them and naming each one a different name and finding different personalities in their little faces and talking to them like she would. Like, I can just hear her little voice saying, "Oh, that one's got a little fuzzy tongue." And I've been writing about that on my Substack, sharing a picture of her and just one of those irises and then writing, "This is Julie," or "This is how I connect with Julie." And that has been so beautiful as compared to last year where I just let myself be in the pain of, well, they could be gone. And now they're back, and they're back in a really profound way in me, and sharing them with other people. I'm starting to get responses from other people saying, "Oh, I have these irises and I want to send you these irises." And it's a whole growing community that reminds me of how Julie worked. And so I also, Heidi, I think part of the process of writing and processing that really intense personal pain is to find a way to make it an action, to find a way to make it real. Like, you lost your dad and it's so soon since he's passed, and you're in the shock phase of it, and eventually you'll get to a place where you can find a way to express him out of you and then collect community to share that with you. Like, my readers now almost know Julie in ways I did because I share so much of her, and it makes her more alive. Um, so that's my suggestion.
And I just wanted to respond to what you said, Heidi, about feeling it all is brutal. It really is. That one of the things that I've learned is that we have to we have to feel it all. We have to let it come through no matter how much it hurts, because it's only in really feeling the pain and the brutal rage and the intense loss that our hearts are open enough to also feel the joy and the beauty and the connection in life. Because if you don't let yourself feel one fully, then you won't feel anything fully.
Everything needs that balance.
Yeah.
Amanda, have you ever heard of the show 6 Feet Under,
I've
the
heard of
TV
it,
show?
yes, but I've never seen
It
it.
it came out years ago, like early 2000s, but there's this, and I think it's early on in the series, there's a scene in that show that is exactly what you described, where it's a funeral home, and the characters run a funeral home, and one of the brothers who runs the funeral home, he talks about having been on a beach. I think he was in Greece, maybe it was Spain, but they were transporting the body by boat, and the women were completely wailing, sobbing, just unabashedly emotion of all of their pains coming out. And he said it felt so different than what we do here in our sterile culture of funeral homes. And he said it was so important because they were able to just dump it all and feel it all, and the raw expression of that emotion then, like you just said, allowed them to be open to the fullness of love
Mm.
and a whole deeper layer of that emotion on both sides of the spectrum. And I forgot what I was going to say about that. Oh, well.
Well, I wanted to share a story about feeling the grief fully from just the other day, and my husband and I were having a really nice time. We were playing some of our favorite music from the 80s and dancing in the kitchen. And in the middle of my dancing, I just felt this huge wave of grief for my sister-in-law well up. And
Oh,
then all of a sudden I was sobbing while I was dancing. And I just carried on dancing and sobbing at the same time. And I had pictures of Kim in my head while I was doing it, when she was younger, and the joy of life that she was filled with and the fun that she was filled with. And then I was sobbing even harder because I realized she was never going to dance again. And then I was laughing because I was remembering all these happy things about her. And so it was brutal and it was beautiful at the same time. And it was good
oh,
to do because when we go to the funeral later this month, there won't be any of that kind
yeah,
of expression going on.
right. So in my you evoked that like opposite emotions and how they collide in the same moment. And that happened to me in my shaman training. One of the things we did was called ancestralization. And it was this process of inviting a male ancestor and a female ancestor to be like our spirits, our spirit guides, and people that we would talk to and evoke and pray with and so forth. And it was this very intense process that lasted 5 days. But one of the things we did was we took a stick to represent the male ancestors. So that was my grandpa Edgar. And we made a stool to represent the female ancestor, and that was my grandma Alice. Edgar was on my mom's side and Alice was on my dad's side. And at the end of all this, we had this stick and stool, and we were supposed to sit on the ground and take another stick and bang on them, like wake them up. Like now it almost said, wake, wake, wake them up, bang, bang, bang. And as you bang, you pray to them and you talk to them like you're slapping them on the head. Go do this for me. I can't do this, so you got to do this. And it's a prayer. Wake up, go be my ancestor and do what I can't do because you're in spirit world and I'm stuck here in the physical world. And so I'm banging on Grandpa Edgar and I'm banging on Grandma Alice. And at the time, I owned a yoga studio that was failing financially. And I found myself saying, I'm mired in financial debt and I can't handle this and I'm so overwhelmed. I need you to just make it so that I can travel and teach yoga. I need you to make it so I can travel and teach yoga. And my grandpa was a very jokester type guy. He liked to laugh. He liked to play tricks on people, practical jokes. And my grandma was a worrier. She cried at a drop of everything. She'd cry at a commercial. She'd cry over what ifs kind of happening. And so I started with the what ifs and the worries because I was completely consumed with this failing yoga studio and I'm going to have to file bankruptcy. And I felt her wake up in me as I'm banging on her. And I felt myself complete, and I did. I completely sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. But then I switched to grandpa and I'm yelling at him, like, you're the business guy. You're supposed to know how to do this. And I started, and it was like I realized, what the fuck am I doing? I'm banging on a stick and a stool in the middle of the woods in New York, like upwoods New York. And I'm wearing feathers in my head and I'm banging on a stick and a stool with a stick. This is stupid. And I just started laughing. And then I'd go back to grandma and I'd start crying. And then I'd go back to grandpa and I'd laugh. And so then I just went boom, 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 boom. And I was laughing, crying, laughing, crying. And it was one of the most profound memories of my entire life. It was so profound. And it did. They woke up in me. And by the way, after that happened, I went back home and filed bankruptcy. My other grandmother died, and the bankruptcy was cleared. And within 6 months, I was traveling around the country teaching yoga because I didn't have the studio anymore.
Yeah,
And
you were set free.
yeah, I was set free. And there's my grandpa, and I could see him on my wall right now laughing at me like, I showed you, I could do it. And my grandma's like wringing her hands, and you filed bankruptcy, so now you have to deal with all this stuff so you could practical.
And now you're going to be traveling around all the time. And what are you going to do? Where are you going to live?
She made sure I always had a place to stay, and he made sure I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. That's another thing that I've learned is that all of the worrying that I got done over the years, because I used to be a real worrier, um, but would pretend that I wasn't, which made it even worse because then the worry's just deep inside, churning away. Um, is that everything is always all right.
Hmm.
Just need to trust, and
Yeah.
it always is. Everything always works out in the end.
And you always figure it out. You have the skills.
Yeah,
You might go through some messes in the process, but they
yeah,
can be fun.
yeah, and they always teach you something. Like since we found ourselves suddenly homeless just over a year ago, the year since then has taught me so much about myself and about what I want and what I don't want. And I keep thinking I know that I've reached the definitive answer now. And then I'll learn something else and discover that I haven't. And so I'll write about it and see what that reveals.
Yep. Yep. And I've written that story of banging on the stick in the stool, and that just makes it even more alive. And I'll never forget that moment.
No.
It
Like
it changed
writing
me.
about Tim made him more alive for me
Yeah.
in a way that I don't think you fully appreciate people as much when they're here,
Hmm.
and when they die, it's put into like stark relief, and you fully appreciate everything that was great about them, but also that sometimes I found him incredibly annoying and frustrating, wanted to shake him. And I wrote all that too in my tribute.
Yell at his dead corpse.
Yeah. And I would never have said it to him when he was alive because I wouldn't want it to hurt his feelings. But the electronic music that he used to make had no rhythm and was really awful sounding. And I don't think I'd
Mm.
even really fully thought that until I wrote it down. But I knew that every time he used to do it, I just used to sit there going, oh.
Ah. Well, Heidi, I hope you find ways to express the fullness of all the feelings, and
Yeah,
that
me too.
that helps you find the beauty of, because I can tell you really love your dad, and he's with you. He's just in you now. So, well, we're coming up on the hour. We should probably say goodbye.
I think so. Yeah, that was lovely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's quickly talk about what it is you've got going, your Bardo project. Will you
Yeah,
tell people
writing the
what's
bardo. So it's a new writing program that's starting in just a couple of weeks, where we are using yoga nidra meditation to go into the liminal state and access the stories that are inside us waiting to come out.
mm,
And then we have a community space and mindful writing content that I'm writing. And we meet every couple of weeks to meditate and write together. And I think it's going to be powerful. And so far, there are 15 women from 5 different countries coming together. Mm. So just a few spaces left if anyone wants to come be liminal with me.
and the deadline is when?
The deadline for applications is a week today, the 10th.
Okay. So sign up now because there's only 3 spots left.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah,
got a really good feeling about how powerful it's going to be.
I do too. I do too. You've been manifesting this. For those of you who don't know, Amanda and I are daily texting friends. We've never met in person. She's out in the UK, I'm in the US, but we text on WhatsApp every day. And so I've watched her manifest these ideas and bring them into reality. So hers is the Bardo, this writing through the liminal space that she's starting right now. And I'm still working on the Women Project, writing these stories of the women I've interviewed about the resistance in Minnesota. And every day I'm writing a new story. And I just shared with Amanda before we got on. I I wrote a story yesterday and I sent it off to the woman for approval today. And her response was, let me read exactly her words. Um, it's so cool to read this story. It's like looking into my own memories. I approve. So it's a whole different experience to be writing about other people's stories. And a lot of what I'm writing about is their grief. And what
Yeah.
I'm finding is that as I write their stories, I'm feeling my own grief from what we've been through in the last 5 months. So you can find those on fiercelovemn.com. That's my Substack, Fierce Love. So I publish a new story every Tuesday, and then paid subscribers get the full chapter at the end of each month. So right now, this month, I'm writing about grief. And so every story is a woman and how she's grieving through this process of what's happening with ice.
Yeah, which is still happening, I see.
Yes. Yes. So we're still grieving and still growing all at the
Yeah,
same time.
all of us are, all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amanda. It's always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
And thank you, everybody who stuck with us for this 50 minutes. All of you for being part of our community and listening to us communicate and chat and be best friends.
Yeah, thank you. Let's
So
do it
thank
again
you.
soon.
Yep. We'll
Bye,
do this
everyone.
again. Bye.